Hello everyone. Today I'm going to try to make some shrimp etouffee. It's one of my favorite Creole dishes. Etouffee means smothered and kind of goes in line with the idea of what's behind it. You make a very thick and decadent roux-based sauce to cook the shrimp in, and then you serve it over rice. And that shrimp is smothered in the sauce. So I'm going to kind of walk through a couple of the ingredients, and then we'll start making it. So I got about 3 pounds of large, like the 30 to 40 count per pound shrimp, peeled, deveined, detailed, that kind of thing. I've got some tomato paste and several seasoning blends here. I've got some basil and thyme herb mix, salt, pepper, garlic, and some Creole seasoning. And then I've got some the garlic part is actually some garlic powder and some garlic paste. Garlic paste is a little too mild. I really like some bold garlic flavor, so I've added some powder to it. Got a little hot sauce, a little Worcestershire with some anchovy paste in it. Got the Holy Trinity here. We've got red bell peppers, celery, and onions. I'm going to end up leaving the celery leaves on the celery. A lot of people cut those off, but those are actually really good, both for you and also flavor-wise, to add into a lot of Creole cuisine. Got a big bunch of green onions. I've got a big bunch of flat leaf parsley, and we've got some flour and butter, which we'll use to make our roux. And we've got some dry white wine, and about 3 cups of beef stock that I made from the concentrated Better Than Bouillon beef. This stuff is great. I've got beef and chicken. You can get shrimp, you can get all kinds of stuff. It's way better than bouillon cubes or any of that boxed broth or stock. It's got way more flavor to it than any of those do. Highly recommend that. And I got just a big thing of rice. I'm going to put in the rice, a whole bunch in the rice cooker. And then what we don't use, maybe we'll have fried rice later or something like that. Alright, I'd already done a bunch of, rough chopping and getting some stuff just cleaned up and all the trash parts thrown away. But the first thing we really need to do is kind of get all the veggies ready. It's very important, particularly with anything where it's going to be based in a roux, that once you start putting heat towards something that you've already got all of your ingredients kind of prepped and ready, that is at least time dependent. Roux is one of those things that you have to monitor very closely, especially if you use the cook high and fast method. It's very easy to burn, and if you burn even a little bit of the roux we're going to make in a little bit, it's very bitter, and you just have to start all over. So we want to make sure all of our stuff's in place and ready to go, cut up finely, and then we're going to kind of go from there. So I'm going to just start. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my green onions. Most of the green onions I'm actually going to only use way at the end, but I'm going to cut the white parts off of the green onions to add in with my regular onions, and then all the rest of the green bits I'm going to put off to the side, and then we'll cut those up a little bit later, because that kind of goes in at the end when the shrimp goes in. It only needs to cook a little bit. But I'll go ahead and cut up some onions, making these slices through the onion this way about 1/8 of an inch, because I kind of want the sauce to be kind of decadent. I don't want it to be chunky like stew, so it's important that the dice is relatively small. Now it will sweat down and lose a lot of its chunkiness as long as you've got it relatively small size to start with. So I got several of these onion halves. Mostly these are yellow onions. I got 2 yellows and 1 white. Alright. So I'll probably speed this a little bit up while I just get these onions chopped. Alright, next up, I'm going to grab the bell peppers. I have to cut these all. I just usually cut off the flanks of the bell pepper by just cutting around and down the sides of them, so that you get mostly the side flanks here. I'm going to just cut them into little strips. start with. We'll get them all cut into strips, and then from there we'll go in and dice them up. Okay, now that those are done, it's time to get to the celery. What I like to do with celery, see how thick it is on this one side. I don't like super big chunks. Again, we're trying to make it fairly decadent. So I'm going to take these and cut them into thirds. So kind of, I roll it onto its edge just a little bit so I can cut off, kind of like, think of it as like one wall, and then I've got kind of the bottom and then the other wall, and then I'll take this and cut this in half so that you get three, not super perfectly even, but in the relative size here. Same thing, cut off the wall, and then right down the middle to cut it in half. There we go. So I'll do that for all these pieces, all the big ones, and then the little ones that are just mostly like leaves, I'll cut them up separately. Not nearly as, I don't need to cut these into thirds, they're so small and stuff like that. So we'll try to get to this, and I'll get back to you in a minute. Alright, now that we've got the main trio of veggies cut, I'm going to set those off to the side. I'm going to chop up my parsley since that's the only fresh herb that I'm really using today. But that doesn't go with my veggies, that's got to go off to the side. That goes in at the end. So I'm just going to, I've already cut off some of the stems, but I'm just going to bundle this up kind of tight. And then run my knife through it one way. And then maybe go back through it a couple of times. One thing I love about chopping up herbs, especially fresh ones, is when you bruise those leaves and you start cutting through the stems and the leaves, they let off an intense aroma, which is wonderful. Alright, and in the same vein, I'm going to go ahead and cut up the green onions, the green part of the onions. A little bit of a bias for surface area reasons. Bias meaning just kind of this diagonal. Alright, now with that, that's the last of our prep work, so it's going to be just about time to get started working on the roux and then start putting it together. So I'm going to leave you here for a sec and I'll be right back. Alright, I took a little bit of a break to clean up all the surface. It's really a good idea when you get major milestones to clean up your area a little bit. Makes it a less cumbersome thing to do at the end. The other thing I did is I went ahead and got the rice started in the rice cooker. It's a couple pieces of advice for that is whenever you get your rice going, before you ever put it in the rice cooker, it's important that you wash the rice. They have a lot of loose starch and stuff on the outside that can make it gummy and can affect the texture very significantly. And so I always run a whole bunch of cool water through it, drain it, water, drain it. Do it a whole bunch of time until the water that you drain out of it is no longer cloudy. So it should be kind of fairly clear water. And then put the amount of rice with the amount of water in the rice cooker or on the stove or however you cook it thereafter. But that'll definitely make for much better rice for no matter what kind of rice you're cooking. We're here ready to make our roux. I've let the pan heat up quite a bit. I got it on medium high, so we are going to do the faster method. Now the downside with the faster method is you're cooking it on high heat, so it can burn. And so it is important that it stays completely attended the entire time. So I got a whole stick of butter. I'm going to let this get going, melting. I got my big whisk. And as soon as this butter gets most of the way melted, I'm going to put in my flour. I don't want this to be on here too long, this butter by itself, because butter also burns pretty quickly, especially at medium to high temperature. So a lot of people will use various animal fats or even like something like vegetable or peanut oil for this. Butter's got a different profile, flavor, and texture. When you make the roux, I like that better, so I tend to use it, but it's also riskier because it will burn itself. All right, all the butter's melted. Put in an equal amount of flour. So I got 8 tablespoons or half a cup of fat, and then half a cup of all-purpose flour. And then we're just gonna cook this out. So a roux is just like the same thing you use to start making a gravy or bechamel or any of those types of things. It's just a fat and flour cooked together. Most of the Creole cuisine starts with a roux for their sauces or for their soups like gumbo and stuff like that. The idea for these, so like a white gravy kind of thing, you would just throw it in there, you would cook it off just a little bit to get some of the raw flour flavor out of it, and then you would hit your milk or your whatever, to sausage, etc. to make your gravy. A roux, same concept. The major difference is you cook it a lot longer, and so the whiter the roux is, the more thickening power it has, but the least flavor it has. And so we want to cook it dark, relatively dark. Like for a gumbo, it would be as dark as you could get it without it being burnt, as dark chocolate brown as you could possibly get it. For this application, we want a little bit more thickening because we're trying to make it more like a sauce and not a soup. And so I still want some thickening aspect to it, but I want all that really good flavor that comes along with it. And so we're trying to continually cook this, moving it. Never let it sit. Never let it sit in the corners. Be careful of like the little edges around the pan. Don't let it sit there. Don't let it sit in the middle. Because this pan's so wide, the center's a lot hotter than the outer. So luckily it's got a little bit of a bevel to it, and I'm moving it around the center here. Notice we're getting close to peanut butter colored. I'm gonna start turning the temperature down. So I was medium high, close to high. Now I'm like medium low. I just want to cook it a little bit longer. We're already, we're pretty close now. We're already almost peanut butter. Peanut butter is really kind of our target. I want this to be right about there. Starting to get a little smoking. In goes all the vegetables. Alright, clean this out. And I want to start moving this around pretty quickly. I'll move this around, so I don't want that roux to cook anymore in direct heat. At this point, I want these vegetables to help cool this temperature of this whole pot down. That's part of why you put them in immediately like that. But then also, I'm going to turn this heat all the way down to, I said medium-low, but I'm going way on the lower side of medium-low at the moment. Our objective over the next several minutes isn't to saute these vegetables in the roux, but to sweat them. And sweat them is a lower temperature version, and sweating, rather than getting browning and that kind of thing you would from like sauteing vegetables, we want them to slowly heat up and then release their liquid. And as they sweat, they will become translucent, and you'll be able to see through them, and they will release a good bit of their liquid. And that will help make the foundation of the sauce. So, and I'm going to pause it here. I'm going to maybe stir it a little bit over the next 10 minutes or so until these sweat, and then we'll come back with that in a moment. Alright, I wanted to pop back in here about 5-6 minutes after I left off just a minute ago, and just so you can kind of see some of the progress here. We have some of the white onions. You might be able to see it through the camera here. Starting to get a little bit more clear. It is important that I have kept moving this all around. It's starting to become a little bit more gummy, a little mushy. You can see it sticking to my spoon. That's natural. It's as they release the water, just like when you make a gravy, as you release the water, it kind of starts to thicken some of what was in that roux. So I'm going to let this keep doing its thing for another I said 10 minutes, but with a double batch, it might actually take a little bit longer, maybe closer to 15, but just keep an eye on it. I'll come back to you here in a minute. Alright, we are back again another like 8 minutes later, and we're getting pretty close to where we want to be. Most of the onions have lost a lot of their opaque color, now pretty clear. It is becoming even more of a gummy aspect to it. We get a lot of viscosity here, which is good. It's just becoming a mush, which is in part what we're wanting at this stage. I'm going to make just kind of a big open spot in the middle here. Move my veggies to the outside for a second. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of vegetable oil, like a teaspoon, just a little bit right there. And then I'm going to bring in my tomato paste. I gotta put a little squirt of chili pepper paste in there just to give it an extra heat to it. Just a little bit, because that stuff's actually pretty hot that I get. And the idea with a little bit of oil is that I'm going to turn the heat up just a tiny bit at this juncture, all the way to medium high. And I want to fry up a little of the tomato paste to get some of the tinniness flavor out of it. Also to kind of roast it so you get this depth that you wouldn't maybe have otherwise. After that's been going for a little bit, I'm mixing up my garlic paste with my garlic powder so that it's a single consistency. And it's going to go in as well. I'm going to let this just kind of sit. Like I said, only just a couple of minutes here for this. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the garlic right here in the middle. If you use fresh garlic, you don't have to use quite the same volume of garlic here, but fresh garlic is significantly more potent. That's why I put in the garlic powder with the paste, just so that you get some of that strength. But now that we're here, I'll start mixing this together a little bit, letting it cook up a little bit, get some depth of flavor. Only like 30 seconds or so once you got the garlic in. And then mix the whole thing together. Make sure it all has the opportunity to mix here. Still keeping that heat back up on medium high while all this operation's going. Medium high, you can see all that steam coming up off of there. Then the next thing, I got some dry white wine. I'm going to go ahead and mix some dry white wine with this. And then let it, again, still on that medium-high side of things. Now that we're melding, you got that acidity from the wine really helps with your overall balance. You got heat, savory, and then that just like adding lemon juice or lime juice to other cuisine, the wine kind of does something similar there with that acidity. But I don't want all the alcohol in it, so I could eventually I'm going to cook this for a long time, so it's going to be all cooked off no matter what I do. But I still always like to go ahead and let it meld just a little bit at this stage before I start adding other stuff to it. And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in my hot sauce, specifically Louisiana hot sauce or Frank's Red Hot. Those are the Tapatio. Those are usually the three that I keep around the house. I'm going to go ahead and add in the Worcestershire and anchovy paste, my thyme and basil herb mix. Remember, I'm saving the fresh parsley for later. Dried herbs usually goes in before the simmer. Fresh herbs usually goes in after. Salt and some Tony Chachery Creole seasoning, a little fresh ground pepper in here. And then I've got this broth. 2 3/4 cups is about what it would normally have called for, but I went ahead and made a little more, a little over 3 cups, so that I can reserve half a cup of liquid or more in case I've got, maybe I didn't cook the roux quite long enough, it's got a little too much thickening power to it, something like that. I'm also going to simmer this at this next stage for a long time, like 40 minutes, something like that. I'll let it kind of come to a boil here. Gonna let it come to the boil, and when it does, I'm gonna reduce the heat down to low, 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 as low as it'll go, and just simmer covered for 40 45 minutes, something like that. Now I'll go ahead and kind of explain a little, kind of the next little bit here as we get in that last little bit of boiling, coming up to temp happening. When I turn it on a real low simmer, I'm going to cover it, and my lid has a little bitty hole to let excess steam and stuff come out, because I do want this to reduce and thicken a little, so it's important that there's a little bit of off gas so you get some of that steam to come out, not to mention pressure. You don't really want pressure buildup. If you had like a solid Dutch oven that covered it solidly and had no holes in it, Grandma always used to like pick the lid up, and you can kind of see here on the right side how there's like a little gap around the edge on one side, like mostly still covered all the way, because you don't want it to dry out as it cooks for a long time. But you want just a little bit to be able to escape, especially as the pressure builds up. The first bit is fine. I don't usually even mess with it or stir it for the first half hour or so, but as enough moisture goes away, then there's a potential for some things to stick and burn. And so in that last half, last half to a third of the cook time, that's when I come and stir it every little bit. And I'll do that, and then I'll come back to you in a little bit. Alright, we're back. We've been simmering this for a good 40 minutes or so. So now that we're here, I'm going to go ahead and turn it up to medium. Bring this back bubbling a little bit. And now is the point in which we bring that 3 pounds of shrimp to the party. I have already tasted it for salt, something you should do before you add the shrimp. It should be a little, before you add the shrimp, it should be just a little bit extra salty. Just a tiny bit too much, just the tiniest bit too much. And then while we're at this stage, I'm going to go ahead and put in all my green onions from earlier. And then those fresh parsley that I chopped up. Stir this all together. And then this is going to then simmer again for anywhere from 10 to 20, 25. Probably not that long, actually. I don't know that it would ever take that long. 10 to 15 minutes probably is my guess. We're really looking for the shrimp to be done, fully turned white, no longer pink or somewhat translucent. It should be white and opaque. And when we get to that point where the shrimp is done, we want to be careful not to overdo it, because shrimp will get rubbery really quickly. Alright, our time has kind of gone by. Take a look at where we're at here. I think we're just about spot on from what I can see. One thing you'll note about shrimp specifically is as they cook, the muscles draw, and that's what causes them to curl even more. And so you should see both the white and no longer pink. You should also, or clear, you should see them draw together. But you don't want them to keep cooking too much longer, because then they will start to get really rubbery. We don't want that. We want to keep the texture really nice. And so at this stage, I've cut the heat completely off. I'm going to take some pats of butter just to add some richness and velvetiness to the sauce here at the end. And I'm going to stir in this and let it melt with the residual heat that is in the pan. Now that the shrimp is actually cooked, we can again check for salt. Our stock is salty, and like the Creole seasoning, we got a little bit of salt. Those kinds of things are salty. The Worcestershire's got salty flavor, so you want to be very careful not to over salt it either at the beginning, because that can be pretty bad. A tasting spoon here and see where we are on salt. Oh, that's perfect. Awesome. No adjustments needed. So my rice was done a little bit ago. It's been sitting in the warmer side on the rice cooker. So I just put a little in a bowl here. Make sure. But here we go. There's our first serving.